So we are continuing part 2 about Rome in lesson 39. And we were talking about the Roman government, and we got down to what the patricians would get together, and they would meet in the forum, and there's where they would make their laws, and they'd get together. The senators would get together and discuss what they should do, and they would elect the two consuls that would represent them military and politically, and also possibly during wartime they would choose someone. The consuls would choose someone to take them in the midst of war. It would be like I wouldn't say it would be like a dictator, but like an emperor type person for only 6 months. Okay, that's where we were. So we're talking about the government. The republic is kind of sounding somewhat like our republic, isn't? We're talking about senators. You talk about senators here, and I don't know if you guys, when you study government, you'll see that we have a Senate too. And we have representatives of every state that go there too. This is not a new thing for us, but it was a new thing for them. The second class of people were called the plebeians. The plebeians were usually, they weren't as wealthy, and they didn't own as much land as the patricians did. So they were the second class, or that you can call them the middle class. And these were the farmers and the artists and the business owners and the traders. They were just the normal working people. But they were Roman citizens, as well as the patricians, and as well, they were both Roman citizens. But at first, they didn't have very much power. They could not even marry into the upper class of patricians at all, so they had to stay in their class in the beginning. That was in the beginning. They formed an assembly, kind of like the House of Representatives that we have, but it was an assembly of just this second class. But their representative in the beginning had not very much power. The wealthy had the most power. And then, of course, there was the humongous amount of slaves. And slaves were not citizens, and they had no legal rights whatsoever. They were slaves. It came as time went. The most people that lived in Rome were slaves, because Rome had conquered other countries, and they brought the other countries, and they brought in slaves. And so they were conquering so many countries, they had so many slaves. So in the time of Jesus, there were lots and lots of slaves. So let's talk about how this all changed, because we know the plebeians, that they actually got to represent themselves as time went on, and they got more power, almost as much power as the patricians had, or the patricians had. I always say patrons, I think of patriots, and that's the way you can remember that they're the higher class. They're like the patriots, the top class, but they're called the patricians, how you say it. Well, anyway, going on, the Republic fought many wars. So they're starting to fight all these wars and take over all these people. The Roman army was very well trained, and to be in the army, you had to be a patrician. You had to be a patrician in the army and to fight. But you were fighting for the whole country. So as time went on, they needed more soldiers, and the patricians thought, well, what about all these merchants and everything? They can fight too. So they started recruiting them from the plebeians. 400 BC, the plebeians wanted more to say because they were serving in the army. So they formed an assembly. The first assembly they formed was the Assembly of Centuries. What's a century? A century was a Roman soldier that was over 100 soldiers. So they put together this assembly of centuries and chose councils, and they became very powerful gradually. Then they formed the Assembly of Tribes, and these represents the other plebeians, and there were 10 tribunals. They called them tribunals that represented them to the senators. In 367 BC, a plebeian served as a consul, one of the top consuls in the country, and some even became senators. So now we have this rise of the middle class that's pretty magnificent, really. Suddenly the middle class is taking over, yet the upper class too is intermarrying with the middle class, and so you're getting more people that are coming in to be represented in the government. Of course, we know the slaves had They're still growing, but they had no power at all. So, and we have all kinds of things going on at this time because we have Rome expanding and taking over other countries. And what an army they had. Their army was trained so magnificently, even more than the Greek, even more magnificent than the Persians, So here we have this Roman army all set out to conquer the world. The important things that you need to know about this section is that our government is based on a republic. Even though we're founded on Christianity, we took in the Roman way of organizing with representatives so that we would be representative without being taxed. Because you see, if you're taxed and you have no say in your money, it becomes a time of rebellion for the people. People rebel when they have to pay money for no good reason. You know that. So that's important. We're kind of organized in the same way with the House of Representatives and the Senate, and choosing from each state those that represent in Washington, D.C. But we have a president. We don't have two councils. We have a president. The Senate, you have to know the Senate was totally against having one ruler. They did not want to have a king. They don't want to have a king that would pass it on and pass on to the next guy and next guy and next guy. And then you end up with these families that are so messed up, they don't even know what they're doing. All they are is living for their own needs instead of the people's needs. And that happened a lot of times. And so the Senate, they would be very anxious if they had one of the councils wanted to take over. Well, we're going to see one of the councils did want to take over for the first emperor of Rome. And I'm going to get into that in a little bit. You know who that was, don't you? Yeah, it was Julius Caesar. So, the Senate fearing these dictators and the tyranny, they caused, some problems among themselves too. Because many would seek rulers' fame, or they would support a ruler, and many would want to be a ruler themselves. But there's a verse in the Bible that says, "Many seek the ruler's fame, but justice comes from God." Kings, rulers, councils, presidents, congresses, courts of law, senates, they can never bring real solutions for a broken world full of broken souls. See, true wisdom comes from God. So as we all look up to God, we can get wisdom and we could get along here. Well, they had forsaken the true and living God long ago, and most of them had been following a whole bunch of made up superhero gods that did them nothing. Did not help them one bit. And we'll see that in the mistakes of man. But so as we look to God and he brings us together, a republic would work if we were under God. So isn't it how the United States of America wanted to be under God? That's the important part, to be under God, the true and living God. So the republic, the new Senate there, and the representatives, they didn't really last that long. Or they lasted, but they weren't that important as time went on, because we know the Caesars that took over. Some senators had their own political interests and not the welfare of the countries, and others took bribes and they were even, murdering each other. Those 300 senators were not on the same place. They were all kind of into what they thought themselves, and things got a little bit crazy, needless to say. But there was a time they needed a strong leader. They needed to unite Rome. They couldn't each 300 senators have their own way, could they? So what would happen? What do you think? A senator, maybe? A world leader to rise? Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Stay tuned.